Hello, everybody. Welcome to Philosapiens, where religion meets reason, and we are back live after a long time. So, welcome to my co-hosts Madan and Kali. And today we have an interesting discussion, not a discussion, rather a review that took place. Um, it's about a conversation that took place between Hamza Tzortzis and Subboor Ahmed. So we're gonna review its discussion on design, consciousness, and AI. That's the title of the video, but they kind of jumped around a bit on a few different topics. But the core theme was, of course, design and consciousness. So welcome back again to Madan and Kelly. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, I'm great. How are you doing?
Pretty good, Madan. Madan, are you there? Or you got a call? Madan, I
I
can't
think
hear
I
you.
think he'll be back. I don't know. Yeah, we can't
Okay.
hear you, Martin.
Hello?
Oh, yes, now we can hear you. Madan, can you hear us? Seems like Madan is having some trouble. Kelly, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so it's a problem on Madan's end, basically. So, yeah, I think until Madan gets his connection sorted out, this is a conversation about basically, I think they start off with design argument. As much as I listened to it briefly and kind of cursively in a sense, but they are reviewing this design argument, and the person in contention in their review is Richard Dawkins, and they think that they picked their his design argument and critiquing it basically, and other things as well along with it, basically consciousness and other things. So yeah, Martin, are you back? And I'm not quite sure what's the problem at your end.
Can you hear
Can you
me?
hear?
Am I
Yes.
audible?
No. Now you're
Okay.
audible. I think for a bit we couldn't hear you.
So let me just ask you, I put myself on aeroplane mode, just obviously for reducing any calls or any interruptions. Do you think that affects YouTube, the
And that would
stream?
affect your internet as well.
No, yeah.
Oh,
If you, yeah, that would affect your internet because you don't get any Wi-Fi signal, basically, right? So
Yeah.
your Wi-Fi is turned off as well.
oh, I didn't know that. I had no idea
Yeah.
what aeroplane mode, how it works. So,
Yeah. It shuts off any kind of signaling, radio
Signaling.
or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, whatever. It
I
just
see.
shuts it down.
That's probably why you weren't able to hear me because I put myself on airplane mode just for the sake of it. But
Oh,
yeah, okay.
okay. All right. All right. So I don't know you heard us or not, but welcome
I heard you. Yes,
on the
I heard you.
stream. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or do you have anything to add before we start the review?
What I would say is that if we're gonna get guest callers, let's do it at the end of the stream. If people ask us questions, then we can, in terms of a typed question, then we can obviously answer. But in terms of guests, we should get involvement from them maybe at the end. That's
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I agree. I agree.
If we have time.
I think
yeah.
this is a big video, so I don't
Yeah,
think
we
we're
might
gonna
not
get
get.
any chance to.
We might
Yeah,
never get to
we
that
might,
point. Yeah.
yeah. Unless until somebody really interesting drops by. Yeah, like what's his
Okay.
name, Anthony or.
Maybe someone who's in this video. Maybe if they drop by here, we're definitely giving them a chance.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. So here's this video. I did listen to it, at 2x, but let's get back to it. Let's run the speed and let's run the video. Shall we run it at 1.25? I think that should be okay, right?
Yeah.
Try it at 1.5. If it's too fast, then we'll slow it down.
All right. Let's start it.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another video. We're going to be going over.
Wait, I'm asking you questions.
Is it now?
Yeah.
About Yeah, so assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Subboor's channel. This is your brother Hamza. So I'm going to ask about a bunch of questions on a very specific, interesting framing argument concerning the design argument. So there are various contentions from the atheist community, scientific atheist community, if you like Dawkins and others, concerning the design argument. And you have an interesting approach on showing their kind of intellectual double standards in a way, or you present a kind of intellectual dilemma for them. If they accept one, they have.
All right, I switched to 1.25 because I think it's a little too fast, right? What do you guys think? Oh, I think it's going to be legible for us, but for maybe a lot of audience, it might not be. That's what my thought is. But you guys suggest. What do you think?
Okay, I guess, yeah, we can go ahead with 1.25 then.
Yeah.
Have to accept the other. If they reject one, they have to reject the other. So explain, what is the problem and how are you solving it?
So one way of looking at it is going back to when Dawkins was being asked, how do you prove the scientific method? And he was with Stephen Law, and one of the audience members put this to him, and his answer was, well, if you base computers on science, they work. If you base this medicine, it works. It works, bitches, right? That was his way of basically explaining it. Now, Stephen Law sitting next to him was, a bit embarrassed by the answer, and I think he said something like, "That's induction." And I actually asked him,
secular reasoning.
yes, yeah. So I actually asked him about this, and this is clear that it doesn't make sense philosophically. But who cares if it makes sense philosophically? Made the audience laugh, right? So let's take what Dawkins has said and apply it. Like, this is one of my things I love about your debates. You simply take the arguments of the opponent. You don't challenge the structure of the
Can we
argument.
pause
You
it
simply
here?
change the variables. So let's change the variables.
So just want to probably give a brief, clarity about what is being discussed over here. I think Subboor over here is saying that during a discussion, Dawkins was asked to prove the scientific method, that the scientific method is true. And Dawkins not being, I'm not sure, I mean, at least from my point of view, I think he's not very philosophically savvy. So he, in order to prove the scientific method, he said that, okay, because, this method gives us some, good results, effective results. Therefore, if he said that, then he probably was trying to prove that because it gives us results, therefore it's true. So that is an N. Someone from the panel actually pointed out that philosophically that doesn't make sense, but because you're using induction. So I think that is what is being discussed, and I think already if purely from an philosophical angle, if we say that if someone wants to prove the scientific method from using the scientific method, that is not possible. You cannot prove the scientific method. It is just a tool that we use that seems to have been effective, and therefore we use it. So I think, do you think, Mahadin, would you like to comment something about that?
Yeah, maybe so. Yes, because in terms of quote unquote colloquially proving the scientific method, the scientific method is different from induction. If you try to prove induction using induction, that's circular. Proving the scientific method is assuming induction. So they're two separate things. Yeah,
right.
It's two separate things. Induction is not the same thing as the scientific method. Scientific method is far more sophisticated, right? So induction and scientific method. The scientific method runs on induction, but it's not the same thing. You can indeed prove the scientific method in the sense that you can distinguish it from other non-scientific means of knowledge gathering and think that it's more precise, more accurate, etc. But that assumes induction already. But then you may ask the question, how do you prove induction? And then you may get into circularities. But you don't get to the circularity at the stage of the scientific method. That's one step. That's one step prior to induction. You can say induction is the final base, if you want to call it, the final axiom, if you want to call it, and science is built on top of induction, is the penultimate stage before induction. Something like that. Because I don't think science and induction are the same thing, right? Induction might be the following. I observe something and then I may make a generalization from it. And science is not just that. If that was just science, then we would be doing science each time we, for example, reason like that. We're not doing science then. Science is very specific. It's a method. It differs from discipline to discipline. There's different procedures involved, etc. And those precepts of the scientific method, let's say replication or the ethos towards having some sort of ethical process to ensure that there's credibility among scientists, repeated testing, or well, I've kind of said that, or falsification or double-blind tests. These things are different, and you can distinguish them from the opposite of doing those things, right? You know, like, let's say looking at a mystic ball. Both can be induction, right? Looking at a mystic ball can be induction. If looking at a mystic ball helped you predict the future, then that would be a superior tool perhaps than the scientific method. Can you see how induction is therefore not the same as the scientific method? So the circularity problems of induction comes before you even start thinking about science. That's what I would say, right?
Right.
Agreed. I think, yeah, let's move on.
If something works, therefore it's true. That's his argument. Okay. Well, let's change that for the concepts of purpose, the concepts of design, these particular concepts which are being used in biology. Now, in River Out of Eden, Dawkins basically says that design and purpose are useful and good working tools for scientists. Now, his opponent, Dennis Noble, also says the same thing, that purpose is a good research heuristic. So this is clear within the biological community. In fact, the late Michael Ruse has a book on purpose as well. So it's clear, it's a consensus that you need functionality, design, purpose as good research tools. So if that particular research heuristic has led to fruitful science and us coming to conclusions we wouldn't have come to otherwise, then it works. If it works, then it must be true. So if we take his argument that he was making with Stephen Law and we were to apply it to biological systems, then he would have to be consistent and say design is true because it works.
Very good. There's nothing else to say. I wonder if he's going to comment on that.
Yeah,
that's very good.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, it's just one of those things I was thinking
Which is interesting because I remember when I was doing biology A-level way back, this is over like 24 years ago, 25, 26 years ago or something. And if I remember correctly, our biology teacher was saying about structure and function, right? Things have a particular biological structure that's in line with the function. Yeah. So, which is very interesting. Yeah.
Which, by the way, is one of the reasons why
Can you pause it?
Controversy about junk DNA. So the genome, it was.
So I think I'd like Mahadan to to comment on what Subboor is actually trying to argue, but what Hamza just said. You know, there's biological structure. Biological systems have a specific structure which is in line with their purpose. Now that is a very specific way of saying. I mean, what he's trying to say is, or what he has said. I think I would word it by this way. The specific biological structures serve a certain purpose, because that statement is quite different from the statement that these biological systems have a specific structure which is in line with their purpose. This statement and the statement that a specific biological structure serves a specific purpose, I think these two statements are quite different.
I think he doesn't believe, the reason being he doesn't believe in evolution, right? So he has to take it backwards pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what he's doing. Basically, he's reversing it to
exactly.
take the meaning
So he's
that
looking
he
at
wants to take.
he's looking at it backwards. He's saying that there's a purpose and then there's a structure which actually is then exists to serve that purpose. Whereas biologically speaking, evolutionary speaking, a structure exists, and if that structure serves a certain purpose, is able to give a specific benefit, then it survives. It helps in in that species surviving. So that is how you look at it. That is how purpose is used in biology and evolution. That is quite different from the kind of design and purpose that these guys are trying to imply. So these guys are using the same word, but the word is being used in quite a different manner in how they're using it in theology and how it is being used in evolutionary biology. And because they are actually specific, their focus is biology. In biological systems, they're saying that a purpose is a good tool, whereas in evolutionary biology, the purpose is not similar to how they understand purpose, right? So I think that's my view on that.
Madan, you want to add
And then,
something to what Kelly has said?
Do you want to add something first? Because I spoke.
no,
You've not.
no. Yeah, Philo.
Go ahead. No, I don't have anything to add. I agree with him. He's using it backwards pretty much. He wants to infuse a sense that the purpose is arriving differently. Basically, his
Yeah.
assumption is already designed instead of
Yeah. So I mean, no. Finish what you're saying.
No. Kelly's already said that. What I wanted to add, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that his point is to be that if we can go with the fact that things work, then we can go with the fact that things work here, right? And I think he's there in here. He's just doing an equivocation fallacy, right, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or I'm not sure exactly what he means by if we can just say it works, because when somebody says Richard Dawkins says it works, right? I mean, you can give more philosophical justification for what he means and expand and exemplify. You can really support what Dawkins means by simply saying it works in the sense that it's a better inductive inference versus others, or something like that. So remember what I said in the first part. I said science uses induction, but you can prove the functionality or the usefulness of science through induction, right? That is not circular. The circularity starts when you start, say, prove induction. But once you've already, when we're not talking about proving induction or not proving induction, we're just, let's say, assuming it for a minute. Yeah. At that point, there is no circularity. Science can receive justification in the same way certain inductive premises have more weight to it than others. For example, all humans are Homo sapien, or all men are mortal. All men are mortal is a superior inductive statement than the following: all men are not mortal. Right? Okay. So which one has better inductive legitimacy? Well, the first statement, all men are mortal, which is superior than all men are not mortal. Right? In the same sense, science can get justification. Right? So science can be put into an inductive argument in and of itself. That's not science proving science. That's induction proving science, because I've already said induction and science are different. Therefore, you can put science into inductive steps, right? Scientific means of predictability is better than non-scientific means of predictability, right? Or something like that. It's like an inductive premise, and it has justification behind it, right? Then when you ask, but what about induction itself? Then yes, then trying to prove induction using further induction will be circular or something like that, right? We can still, that's the problem of induction or something, and we can talk about that in a minute or something. But when you're trying to justify science, you don't need to talk about the problem of induction. It can just justified as any other inductive premise, right? I think all men are mortal is more legitimate than all men are not mortal, or something like that. And similarly, science works in the sense that it's better than other forms of other methods. It's more precise, it's more accurate, etc. Simple as that. So there's no so it receives its justification like that. If that's the case, then when Subboor comes out with, if we can just say things work, then I can say this works. No, it does. Is the design argument justified in the same sense as any other inductive argument? And then you can say no, because the design argument has all the flaws that we've already talked about historically, right? David Hume's talked about it, and any problems with ID. We're not just saying it works then, but so Dawkins' colloquialism is a little bit bad, right? We'll just say science has justification because you can prove it through induction, right? Evolution has justification because you can prove it through induction. The design argument that the design only complexity comes from design only is false through induction. Complexity doesn't always come through design, and then you just debunk that. That's all you have to do. So all I will say, I'm pretty sure Dawkins would agree with me here. When he says science works, it just means it has justification because we see it through observation, right? That's how I see it. And we also see evolution mindless physics through observation, right? All the predictions of evolutions are far superior to the prediction of a design argument or something like that. All the, or a God being a designer. All the Bayesian arguments, all the abductive arguments for evolution, defeats arguments for theism. That's it. That's all. That's all you have to do. Yeah.
Right, and I think yes, I totally agree with you that he's committing an equivocation fallacy. And do you think he's committing this similar equivocation fallacy when it comes to the word design and purpose? That how he's using that. I mean, he's saying, okay, so there's purpose and design. How it is being used, how that word is being used in evolutionary biology, and how
Oh,
they're
yeah,
using it.
yeah.
Right.
Of course. I think Daniel
So they're
Dennett
committing a double equivocation fallacy, basically.
Yeah. I think Daniel Dennett said that we shouldn't be held hostage to this kind of folk notion of purpose, right? Purpose
Right.
is not the sole exclusive possession of designed. When I say design, I think agency produced design, right?
Right.
Mindless physics can also be a quote unquote designer. Right now, some people think that's a metaphor, right? And you can view it like that. That's a perfectly happy understanding, right? But other people like Daniel Dennett thought that if something is able to design things, that's all that's required to mean that there's another form of designer, like the blind watchmaker, right? The blind watchmaker is what? Is just inheritance, reproduction, natural selection, etc. That is the blind watchmaker, meaning that there is a designer. The designer is the processes of evolution, right? And the mechanisms of evolution. And in the same sense, you may say the word purpose should also not be held hostage by theists, right? Purpose, that there might be a purpose in the sense that the evolutionary processes produce certain adaptations that are built for survival. There is a purpose behind it, right? Now, depending how you want to view that, that's a perfectly legitimate way of seeing it. But obviously, what Dennett is saying is that the purpose is not the purpose of a mind, where a mind, mental reality, intentionally designs something to be this way. It just means that the blind watchmaker has a purpose, right? If you're not happy with that, comfortable with that language, we can simply say that this is a metaphor, right? Dennett didn't think that Dennett didn't want to go down that route. Dennett thought that it's not just a metaphor. Nature does have a purpose, right? But I'm happy either way. I don't really care, right? If you think it's a metaphor, I think that's fine as well. It's not really a purpose. It's a process, right? The adaptation that happens is because the disadvantageous characteristics are weeded out and filtered out through a purification process, and the advantageous genes are more abundant to fit the ecological scenarios, the ecological environmental niche, right? And in that sense, there's a fit, right? And it appears like a purpose, but it's not a purpose. It's a function or a process that's produced through blind forces, right? And they're just a process. So if by purpose we mean an intentional, deliberate, sentient creator put it there, then it's not like that. In that sense, it's just a metaphor to say purpose. What we all we mean by that is just mindless physics creating adaptations that are fit for the environment, and it seems like a purpose. Even Dawkins says that. Dawkins says that he uses colorful, artful language in a metaphorical sense because it's easy to understand. So keep in mind, Dawkins is a writer writing books for the lay audience so that it's more interesting, and it's a very artful way to convey information, to say that evolution did this for this reason, and it sounds purposeful.
Yeah.
But he's also very precise to point out that he doesn't literally mean that there is a purpose. So simple as that.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, and I mean, I would say that what they are inferring from purpose is that somebody assigned that purpose, whereas how they refer, what they mean by purpose is that these things or certain functions or certain processes or certain biological systems serve a certain purpose. Now these two things are completely different: assigning a purpose and something being assigned a certain purpose, and something being able to serve a purpose. Something can serve a purpose without anyone assigning that thing that specific purpose. right? It can just happen to be in let's say, something can be of use without anyone assigning it that usefulness, because it just happens to be in the right place for that, for the other thing to be useful. So I think you're right, as I mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, in this purposive language can be applied to anything. For example, is the purpose of the sodium atom to attract the chloride atom? That's the purpose of the
Right.
sodium. But it's not really, is it? Purpose.
It's not.
And in the same, evolution is pretty much the same kind of thing, but maybe it's a higher level sort of kind of system it becomes, and it seems like a purpose, but it's not. It's not really purpose. The only way you can prove that it's a purpose of a mind is by proving that these things came from mind. And in order to do that, you have to justify your design argument. And we've seen a lot of design arguments, simple watchmaker argument, or fine-tuning argument, and all of the arguments that debunk that. If they successfully debunk it, then there's no purpose. If they don't successfully debunk it, then you may have more grounds to think there's a purpose. That's it.
Right.
Well, before we can establish there's a purpose, we have to think whether those arguments work. But what Subboor's trying to do is kind of go through the back door and just say that we can just assume it, because Dawkins just assumes science works. No. Everything that I said before that, which is that we don't just assume science works, right? We've got justifications behind it. Remember, we're not using the scientific method to prove the scientific method. That would be circular. We're using induction to prove the scientific method, which is not circular. Right. But then when we try to prove the induction using induction, that would be possibly circular. But we're not trying to prove, the question is not trying to prove induction. The question is trying to prove science. Given that they're different, therefore there is no circularity.
And I'll use an example. Although we have already established the point, but in Quran it's mentioned that Allah created the stars so that people can navigate and travel and find their directions and paths. So you would say that now indirectly they would think that, okay, this is the purpose of the stars. Now, from a cosmological sense or from a scientific sense, I don't think that makes much sense, because there are many stars and galaxies that we are not even able to see, which have gone beyond the observable universe, and which are not visible to the naked eye, which were not even visible to the naked eye even at that point in time. But however, what I'm trying to say is that a human would say that, okay, now all of these stars in the sky are serving this purpose for us. Yes, they are. We are able to use that these stars in the sky for a specific purpose. But someone claiming that, okay, now that is the purpose that they have, that is quite different. These two things are very different. So yeah, that's what we're trying to point out. These two statements, are quite different.
That's the adaptation that we are talking about, and that's the adaptation we are talking about in the evolution as well, pretty much. And
exactly.
This is what Subboor doesn't understand, basically.
Yeah.
Anyways,
okay, I guess. And I think this is the primary point that they'll build on in this video. I guess they'll move on to different points, but I think this is one of the main points that's the basis of this video, I guess.
Was considered mostly junk. A lot of scientists said, this is junk. And even one particular philosopher, Philip Kitcher, he said something really absurd. He said, most of the human genome is junk, so God needs to go back to school, right? Now, interestingly, this is really interesting. There was a discussion in 2012 with the ENCODE study, the DNA Encyclopedia. They discovered that most 80% of the genome is actually functional. It actually does something. That non-coding part plays a role in gene expression and other things. And there was a treasure trove of data that they basically discovered, which was going to help in terms of disease and all these types of things in medicine. So it was clear it's no longer junk, right? Now, when Richard Dawkins was asked about this by a former chief rabbi of the UK, Jonathan Sacks, in a debate, and Jonathan Sacks says, well, we used to be told that, it's junk, and now we found that it's no longer junk. And remember, the Darwinists were previously saying natural selection led to all this garbage being stuck in the body, right? It's all our evolutionary history. And then Dawkins says, well, of course natural selection would get rid of the junk and would keep these things functional. So he actually gave the exact reverse answer. So in terms of junk DNA, we have a live example where the design heuristic is not only helpful, it actually leads to a astronomical increase in terms of the new data that we have discovered about how the body works. Okay, so if we were to apply this, right, the structure and function, and we were to apply this throughout our lives, we cannot live without design. We cannot live without purpose. We cannot live without these things. But the other thing which I wanted to put to you is this. One of the things that you must have noted during many of your debates is the standard rejections of the design inference based upon common themes, like there is no frame of reference. You can see a mobile phone being designed in a factory, but we haven't seen universe makers making universes. Or they would say something like, this design is poor. This could have been optimized. Now, there's two things. Bad design, good design is based on purpose, right? So if you walk past a building, the building has collapsed, you can say it's bad design. But if the building was designed for 100 years, you're walking after 1,000 years, then it's not. However, there's something I was thinking about. When Francis Crick, in his book Life Itself, was speaking about this theory of directed panspermia to explain the origin of life, because life is so incredibly complex when you go down to the molecular level. The first cells are way more complex than what anybody could have imagined.
So they came out from space.
From space, from another civilization. When he came up with that theory, he was making a design inference.
Yes.
And he didn't say, well, it's poor design. He didn't say we didn't see designers making this. And when Dawkins was asked the same question in an interview, and he was pushed about the first life, he said the same thing. Now, the first thing I want to put to you, Hamza, is he didn't say the standard contention that we hear when we use the design argument, but who designed the designer? He didn't say it's poor design, and he didn't make any of those common objections.
Yeah, because it's like almost a God replacement. They know they have to provide some kind of answer, yeah? But also, even the two contentions are false anyway. You don't need a frame of reference to infer design. I don't think I've ever seen a phone being designed before. Just because I haven't seen the first phone being designed or a phone being designed, that I'm not allowed to make the inference that this phone is designed. That's complete nonsense.
And
sorry to say.
It is. And
like, for example, the first time I saw, when someone writes things in the sand, like I love you, or please marry me, or whatever the case may be. I've never seen someone do it, but the first time I saw it in the sand, I'm not going to say, oh, that happened because of the waves, yeah? So, no, someone actually did it, right? So that's not a very strong contention, first and foremost, right? And we say it's designed because there's something about it that we could infer that it was designed, not necessarily that we have a history of things being designed that look like that. He said they've got it the way around. The other thing is, what was the other contention?
Can you pause it?
To say?
So who designed design?
No, there was another one.
I think before you go, Kylie, I think there's more than one topic there. I think we should have paused it a long time ago, because now he's talking about another thing. So I don't know. I think I've forgotten.
You can respond to the earlier point, because I think there was a point that
I've even forgotten. I don't know why I've forgotten it.
You want me to go back?
Oh yeah, it's the genes.
It was sort of panspermia, the panspermia point that Subboor said. Somehow he's saying that he's inferring design, and Dawkins, even when he's referring to it as design, he doesn't. For some reason, Subboor is saying that he doesn't bring up the problem of who designed that designer. And I don't know. I mean, Mahadan, maybe you would like to comment on that a bit more. I'm not very well versed in evolutionary biology or in evolution, or in the panspermia theory or hypothesis. But I have something to say about it, but I would just guess what they're trying to say.
I think my response to that panspermia theory, and that Dawkins is alluding to, was a response to the objection to what is that? Abiogenesis, basically, right? So, Madan, before you speak, I'll just say a little bit about it and my understanding of what Dawkins was referring to. So, there was this contention regarding abiogenesis and the early environment being non-reducing, basically, at that time, right? And they said, how could this Miller-Urey experiment could produce all these amino acids, and how could the first cells be formed, basically, because we haven't got that kind of a. So then the next possible theory was, and the theists came out with, oh no, then your abiogenesis theory is debunked right away, and all these things. And then they said it's still possible that there are many environments out there, even on comets, say, I'm talking about comets that are revolving around in the Oort cloud, where there is such an environment where these first cells could have formed with the oxidizing environment, basically, and not a reducing environment, or the other way around. I forget which one, basically. And so the first cells, or the very basic cells, could have originated somewhere else, and not that some aliens would have created. So panspermia doesn't mean that it has to be a designer.
Yeah,
Panspermia only means that it could have evolved somewhere else where the environment
exactly.
was healthy enough for them to evolve, pretty much.
He's
And
mixing these two different
yeah,
two
absolutely.
points, right? Two
So I
points,
think
two
his,
different
his
points.
his his point being that he's saying that aliens designed it. I think that's
Yeah,
probably a stretch too far, pretty much, in my opinion.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think
Madhav.
what he's saying is, I'm not sure if he's saying that, but what he's saying is that he's not directly saying that that Dawkins said that this must have been um, designed by an alien, but I think what he's referring to, what he's talking about, is that the concept or the hypothesis of panspermia was required. Uh, from what I understood, from what he's saying, is that the hypothesis of panspermia was actually presented because of this problem of design, this complexity of the uh, you know
The earlier
emergence
cells,
of
basically.
life. Yeah, the
Yeah.
emergence of life, right? And how
Right.
complex that would be, and how much. And I think that concept and the hypothesis. Now that's what I can remember from when I read it briefly. This hypothesis was presented because of the lack of time, because how soon life emerged on Earth after
Right.
its formation, and not there not being enough time on Earth to for the for all the chances to have occurred all at the same time, to have formed this complex life, or the emergence of life. And that's why I guess this hypothesis was presented, that okay, even if the life of Earth itself is not very long, what's possible is that maybe life came from somewhere else when it would have even further. So if Earth is only 4 billion years old, and life started to exist maybe just half a million years after Earth
The
formed,
Big Bang.
then
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, half a
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
million,
My bad. My bad. Yeah.
half a billion years after Earth formed,
After the Earth formed.
even and it's not sufficient time for life to emerge on Earth, then it could be explained away by life having the initial life forms, or cell, or whatever the life form beginning of life was, to have formulated anywhere else, which might have even let's say in a place where it had maybe 2 billion years or 3 billion years to form, and then it came to Earth somehow, in a comet or something. And that's
Yeah.
how
That's
you could
that's
explain
probably
away that shortage of time, if that time is not enough. So I guess that's why the concept of panspermia emerged. And then the alien concept was just, I guess, was a response to a response that Dawkins gave, right? That if even if we say that even if it was designed, then we could say that this was designed by an alien.
yeah. I mean, yeah, quite possible. Quite possible.
Even if we accept that this was designed deliberately, then we could say that maybe this was designed by an alien.
This was designed by an alien, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe a tongue-in-cheek response in that
yeah,
sense.
maybe. Yeah.
Martin, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I mean, they've said quite a few things. So one of the things that they said was that the fact that there is 80% of the genome is functional. The other things that they said was the transpermia point. The other stuff that they said
Yeah.
was that if you say hey, good morning on a sand, or you see a mobile
Yeah.
phone, you go see the past. So these are the main things, kind of. I think I've summarized it effectively. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of mumbling going on. So it's very
Yeah.
difficult to get the key points. The other thing
Yeah.
is, before I comment on that, keep in mind we're assuming what Hamza and Subboor is saying about Dawkins is accurate, or saying about the science that the 80% of the genome is functional is accurate. But given that both of these guys have been notorious for quote mining, misrepresenting, decontextualized, taking things out of context. Look at the video by Phil Harper with Subboor's favorite anchor, which is Elliot Sobel.
Elliot Sober, yeah.
And Elliot Sober's like constantly, almost at every point, siding with Phil and disagreeing with Subboor, right? So we know that these guys can misrepresent. So before we can really finesse exactly whether they're saying is correct or not, just keep that in mind. I'm very skeptical and very cynical that these guys are getting everything correct. Really, 80% of the genome is really functional. I've not really heard that.
Yeah, Martin, Yeah,
go on.
I wanted to raise that kind of contention as well, and I agree. We are reviewing this, assuming as if their information is correct, and you're right in pointing that out. I totally agree that
Yeah,
to that point.
because I've not really heard that as a consensus amongst mainstream scientists. Maybe that's like one point of view or something. I don't know. So maybe they're cherry picking. I don't know what they're doing. I would really like to see what that means. I'll go back to the drawing board first. But what I would wager that is not entirely accurate. Perhaps what it probably means, like we know already about biology, is that it's a vestigial trait, meaning that it's reduced in its majority of its function, but there are certain functions that it still has, which I do know is the case. That even non-functional genes do have some function. It's just that it's over complex for the functions that it has. It's like the appendix, right? It's a vestigial organ. Appendage does have functions, but vast majority of its complexity is redundant. That is what a vestigial trait is. And in fact, vestigial traits are a very strong argument for blind evolution, right? In fact, like Elliot Subboor said, that it's not just mainly commonalities between organisms that we think is evidence for evolution. It's specific types of commonalities. For example, pseudogenes. And he's talked about pseudogenes just a couple of months ago with Phil Harper. So has Elliot Subboor not been informed that pseudogenes are not real? That pseudogenes meaning that genes that are no longer producing functional sort of proteins that are working, right? I'm pretty sure Elliot Subboor knows then perhaps that if there is some functionality to the fact of these pseudogenes, that they're reduced. They are primarily non-functional, right? So, if there are functions there to do with certain regulations or something like that, regulatory processes, they do some certain things, but there's a lot of DNA there that just doesn't need to be there for it to do those things, right? And henceforth, it's a vestige of our evolutionary history. And if that's the case, they're still non-functional primarily, and that's evidence for evolution simply because they need not be there. They absolutely, they kind of leave a trace of the past of step-by-step evolution where certain genes become redundant over time, and it's a very good prediction of evolutionary theory. So that's the thing that I'll say about the non-functional stuff. In terms of, and also, by the way, those non-functional parts.
Madan, I'll also add one more thing here. If he thinks 80% of the DNA is functional, and still there is 20% of it that is dysfunctional or not adding anything to it, I would say that's still a failure for a perfect God, basically, right? And it would still go towards, probabilistically, it would still favor evolution rather than a God who's perfect, basically.
You know what they would respond.
Yeah.
You know how they would respond to that, right? And I think they do mention that point, and I will actually
because they'll
want
say
to bring
that
that up.
20% else would be found to be, you have to
They say
live with
that
it.
you have no proof that they have no purpose. You just don't know what the purpose
exactly.
is,
You don't
because
know
you
that.
don't know the purpose of anything, right? So basically, one could raise the question that what is the purpose of the stars and galaxies which are beyond the observable universe, which are not directing us or affecting us in any way? But they would say, no, you don't know that it's not affecting us, but maybe it is.
Yeah,
So you cannot prove that there is no, it serves no purpose. So I think that would be their argument. But yeah, there's a problem with that argument, and I think I'll bring that up later on.
Yeah.
Let me just give you an example. Like the human tailbone is a very good example of a vestigial trait that has been reduced in function, that has no real basis of being there. Does it have some functions? Yes, it does, but it doesn't have to be in that way. The tailbone is a very good evidence of a common ancestor with apes, right? But yeah, now if you take two theories, let's say a perfect designer, and you think of imperfect evolutionary processes through step-by-step mutations, genetic transmission, etc., through heritage, and then a slow purification and filtration leading to separate species, which one is a better theory to explain, for example, the presence of the tailbone? And the tailbone, for example, is better fit for step-by-step evolution versus a perfect creator, right? You would expect on evolution, for example, certain functions change, morph, right? Whereas a designer has a multiplicity of different ways of creating the same thing, including instantaneous creation, right? A designer, So a perfect designer in particular, right? So therefore, for example, the tailbone is a better source of evidence for evolution. Now, you may then, if somebody comes along and say, well, you don't know really whether that is just, for example, you don't know whether the tailbone hasn't got other functions, etc. That is simply a red herring, or I would say it is ignoring the evidence as we see it, right? You can say that about anything at any point, right? If that is ignoring the most current form of evidence of something, right? So if you have a criminal trial, for example, and all the evidence suggests that something is one way or another, like this person committed a crime, and not you could even say in that stage, well, we don't know everything about this, right? We take the best evidence that we have right now to make the judgment, for example, right? If something like the tailbone right now suggests that, that we don't need it, it's just there, kind of like a feature of the past, right? It has some ligaments attached to it, but it is reduced in many functions that was present for a different species, but it's not in our species absolutely necessary. And that's the latest evidence. Saying that, we will one day discover function is almost circular. It's assuming that there is a designer who designed it for, but that's the thing that we're trying to prove, right? Why should we assume that, right? Why should we assume, for example, let's say during our embryology, let's say look at the nipples, the male nipples, right?
Yeah.
There is a function behind it. Or let's think about what is that teeth that we remove?
And the wisdom teeth.
Wisdom teeth. Why should we assume that these have? That's a
Wisdom
low
foreskin.
blow.
Just imagine the foreskin that the Muslims are obliged to remove.
Yes, it has exactly
The circumcision. Yeah.
Yeah, because you could say, so this is just a cheat move, right? Imagine if we prove everything has a function, then I could say,
Yeah. Exactly. I was going to say. Yeah.
I could simply say maybe they don't have a function. Right now,
Yeah.
it looks like in the future they don't. See, can you see? You're playing this stupid game of cheating, right? We don't do science like that, because any scientific theory we judge based on the current evidence. Just because one or two areas and organs we've discovered actually what we thought had no function actually has a function, does not mean every single other one we will. We have millions and millions of parts which don't have a function, and at this moment, unless you could show that in fact we are rapidly finding functions about everything that we just, then I might go, okay, you know what? We should be skeptical before saying that this doesn't have a function, or this is a vestigial trait. But it's not like that. Yes, it's correct to say sometimes when we thought something was completely dysfunctional, actually had one or two functions, etc. But it's not happening for everything, and therefore we should confront the evidence as it is, rather than just assuming in the future there'll be a function, because that's begging the question. It's circular. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. I just
mean, they
wanted
want
to
to.
add one more.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to add one more example, which is not for the vestigial organs, but for
Oh, bad
supports the
design.
evolution. Basically, supports for the evolution. Basically, is the right laryngeal vein in
Laryngeal nerve. Yeah.
giraffes. Basically, it goes through a highly circuitous route,
Yeah.
and it in a sense proves our ancestry from water-based animals, and especially the fishes are like 300 400 millions back. Our ancestors came through the descendants of fishes, basically. So I think there's plenty of these dots, or what do you call these, Lego bricks, which you can connect and and get to evolution. Whereas the same is not true for the design in any case, basically.
I mean, one of the. Yeah, you're done.
Yeah, sure.
And two. There are two things that actually made me really think. About the existence of God, and when I was young, and so it was philosophy, the first thing, and then I was then I saw these videos in which I guess it was both of them were from were of Richard Dawkins, and he was explaining. One is a video in which he's showing that giraffe's neck, with how long that laryngeal nerve is and how redundant and useless this path is that it takes. So it's that laryngeal nerve issue, and people should actually look it up. I mean, it takes such a long, in needlessly long path, uh, you know, to come back to the same point, almost to the same point. And that was one of the things that made me really think that, okay, so this is God's design, really. And the other thing was the eye, the structure of the eye, of a human eye, which is inverted. So and it's you have to see to understand what I mean. And so you just look it up, the human eye, and how that's the structure is inverted, and due to which we have a blind spot. And it's not necessary to have a blind spot. There are, I believe it's a mollusk who has an eye, and who doesn't have this kind of blind spot, because it is, how I would say, it is way better design for an eye than having those optic nerves coming
Quote
from
unquote
inside the eye.
design. Mhm. I
Quote
said
unquote
quote unquote
design.
design.
Quote
Yeah.
unquote design. Exactly. So one could, yeah, because otherwise thieves would say, you see that, so you're saying that is design. I'm saying
Yeah.
that evolution is, I mean, these are the, I would say, hallmarks of the fact that I think these things evolved. They were not a result of a deliberate design. Because if they had been, then everything would be made to the perfect, particularly when you say the designer is perfect. So maybe a bad designer designed it, a very weak designer, maybe, yeah, but it doesn't look like.
Yeah,
And this
just
was
touching
made by a
upon what
perfect
Kylie
designer.
said. Yeah, just touching about what Kylie said. You can compare evolution to the evolutionary hypothesis to a perfect God hypothesis, but you don't have to do it like that all the time. You can compare
Yeah.
evolutionary processes to instantaneous creation hypothesis,
Okay.
right? And therefore it's compatible with God, right? You don't have to. It's not necessarily evolution versus God, right? You can do it like that, and
Yeah.
I do not do it like that, but it doesn't have to be. My point is, you can even if you you can even if you assume God, if assuming all of that, you can compare evolution versus the theory of instantaneous creation, and all the evidence, pseudogenes, morphological structures, retroviruses, geographical biodiversity, geographical, or not just geographical, the geographical distribution, of animals and species and fossils, etc. But the mutational rate, things falling in within the region of mutational rates, right? Well, like finding species evolving around the time we would expect it to evolve and
Yeah.
emerge. Yeah, things like that. All our evidence suggesting that if God or any designer created something, yeah, he didn't do it instantaneously. He did it through
Yeah.
evolution, right? So it doesn't have to be evolution versus theism. It's just evolution versus a different form of creation process. The kind of old instantaneous creation, click my fingers and he created cows, click my fingers, he created horses. At the very minimum, that's not true. Because, this is why a lot of theists are attracted to theistic evolution. Because
Right. I think a lot of modern Christian theists lean towards this evolution, theory. Basically, they adhere to it and still are Christians, basically, and that's not true within Islam, basically. I have seen very few who do still adhere to, and there are few, but at least these bunch of guys are not in that camp. But yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I think
they can't do
your
that.
point is really yeah.
Just to clarify, they can't do that with Islam, I think, as much. But I mean, I'm not sure you can do that with Christianity either. But I don't think you can do it with Islam because Adam was not created from apes, right? Simple as that, right? It's just they don't want to accept that. I think these guys go as far as maybe evolution is true, right? But at the very minimum, human evolution is not.
It's false. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
so I think
Wasn't Hamza one of those in his earlier days who believed in evolutionary theories? I think I remember in 2012 or something closer to that point, he was still used to think evolution could be gelled in with Islamic theology, and then he changed his mind. That's what I remember, but I could be wrong, probably. And I
maybe
think
I, yeah, I don't know.
there was a scholar in 12th or 13th century who believed that there's a theology within Islam which could support evolution.
Yeah,
Probably, but
I
I
don't
could be
know.
wrong. So yeah.
Yeah, I think these guys are just attacking it at every level just to create as much doubt as possible. But
No, I think they've leaned now more towards like the more literalist understanding of it. Yeah.
yeah, but
So
I don't think you can deny evolution. Evolution is very. If God or any designer created animals, he didn't do it through a single
instantaneous.
trick,
Yeah.
right? He didn't just create things in fully forms and put them there, right? The evidence suggests genetic relationships. Yeah, the pseudogenes. The reason for the pseudogenes is that that's what we expect on evolution. We see it in the lab as well. As species change, it creates a long growing list of dysfunctional genes as its functions change over time. Now that's something that we see in the lab. And then now we go, all right, now we saw this in the lab. Does this apply across the rest of the animals? Right? What should we expect? What we should expect is when we look at one animal and another animal and go across it, we should see these pseudogenes arising. That's a prediction of evolution, right? And you can compare that to the null hypothesis or another hypothesis, which is that no, these species were created in fully formed way through, I create the cow, I create the horse, or something like that. And we compare the two theories, right? And then when we look at the DNA, we do see the pseudogenes as well. And the only known mechanisms that we know that creates those pseudogenes is through the mechanisms of evolution. So the best inductive inference to explain that is the mechanisms of evolution. That's a surprising prediction that we should not see unless evolution was true, right? So if there is a designer, he designed it by these mindless processes. Simple as that.
Yeah, there's one other possibility that you're missing out, Nathan. And that other possibility is maybe God designed it in a way. He made it instantaneously, but he made it appear to us that, oh no, this made it appear to all of us that this is in line with evolution to test us.
Yeah.
He's the best of the deceivers, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There are Christians who say that. There are Christians who say that, for example, the young Earth creationists, they say that some of them, their view is that the Earth, this universe is not as old as it seems to us, and God has created it such so that He can test us.
Yeah, I mean the evidence suggests there's a spherical Earth, right? All the evidence
Yeah.
suggests there's a spherical Earth. Everything, you can think of all the circumstantial evidence, the direct evidence, the indirect evidence, all the predictions that only make sense if there's a spherical Earth versus a flat Earth, right? But then you could just go, well, it looks like it's a spherical Earth, right?
Yeah.
But reality is that it's a flat Earth. It's just, it's an illusion, right? I mean, that's just stupidity, right? It's just stupidity, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
True. Or let's move on.
I think one
So
more
does
point.
the
I think
frame of
one
reference-
point. Sorry, one point that was missed is that Hamza also pointed out that in order to he was responding to the contention from non-believers that we cannot just infer design on its own. We need a standard, we need a reference point to declare something as designed or not. And he said, no, that is not how we declare something or see something as design. We just look at something and there is something about it that makes us believe that it is designed, even if we have not seen it getting designed, or even if we have not seen something like it getting designed. So what is your view on that, Madan?
Yeah, I remember that. I forgot about that. That was the last point regarding the mobile phone.
Yeah,
Because he's never seen the mobile phone being made, but he still
yeah,
assumes that it was made. But he's seen many other objects like it being made. You know,
exactly.
we know factories exist. I've been in a factory, right? We've seen many objects like it. I've seen builders make things. I've made things. You know, like I know I know people who work in the mobile manufacturing industry. We don't have the same thing, for example, for animals, right? We've never seen something like that. So it might be the case that it's like saying I've never seen Subboor being born. I just assume came from a parent, right?
Exactly.
No, you've seen other people being born. Yes, specifically, you've not seen Subboor being born, but you've seen other people being born. You've seen pictures of this. You know how the birth canal, the reproductive systems work. You know, you've been in we've got a wealth of evidence of childbirth. You've not seen specifically Subboor being born, but you've got a wealth of other evidence. In similar vein, you've not seen specifically a mobile phone being made, but you've got a wealth of other evidence that shows that this is the type of thing that gets made like that, right? So we're not just assuming this through some sort of magical intuition or some axiom that we just kind of accepted, right? There are certain things that are analytical truths, like 1 + 1 = 2, or all bachelors are married, or triangles have 3 sides. It's not like that. It's not some analytical truth that complex things have designers. It's a synthetic truth, right? We learn it through observation, right? Based on the historical evidences of those things, right? But then he says, when you get to an island and if you see something like we're not going to think it's, but that's because those type of writings on an island, generally speaking, far as we know, doesn't come through evolution, right? Other stuff we have discovered come through evolution. Other stuff we have discovered that come through physical processes. For example, diamond is formed through physical processes, a blind mechanism. And we know the processes. Stars form through blind physical forces, and we know the processes, right? For something like I was here, let's say, on on an island. We don't have anything similar for that, other than humans making. Until that changes, we've got no reason to change our mind. It's still using historical induction, right? Until we find like a blind process or an evolutionary process that's able to do something like that, then we will change our views on that as well. If evolution could have just made something like that, like it just produces writing on beaches or something, and then we can make predictions through that or find out mechanisms, and guess what? Then we will change our views on that. At this moment, we don't, right? So that's what I would say to that.
I think what I'd point out to is the fact that all of the things that he's referring to, these are things that are made by humans, right? Or he would when he looks at something like these, his inference would not just be that these are designed. He would infer that these are designed by a human. So, for example, he would look at a mobile phone. He wouldn't say, "Okay, this looks very designed. Maybe God created it and placed it over here." Would he believe that?
No, of course not. Yeah.
It is. Why not? If he's saying it is designed, if he looks at if his argument is this, you see, we think we look at a building and we say this must have a designer, and then why don't we say that when we look at a tree? Well, when you look at a building, you don't just say that, okay, maybe this was designed by God. No, you don't, because this is something that humans create. There's something like what humans create. So you never look at a building and say maybe this was created and designed by God. What you actually say is that, okay, maybe this must have been designed by human, because that is how similar things are designed by humans, because I know that similar things are designed by humans. But now if you go to other things like trees, Now you never look at a tree. Maybe a human carved it. You would not, because you know that these things are generally not. It is possible that a human carved a tree, something, a piece of wood, to look like a tree, right? It is possible, but you would not say that this tree was carved by a human or a specific tree-like structure, because you would say no, this is something that naturally occurs. So I think his how he infers design, or how he projects design onto natural things is already his reasoning is already flawed. He is referring to human like design, and from that he's projecting that to other natural things. And I guess, I mean, this is already visible. I think there's a flaw in that reasoning. And then there are things about, it's not just, what he pointed out. We just look at things and we know there's something. What is that something? We have certain feeling that it is designed. What is that feeling? Can you explain that to me? Well, that feeling is something that, generally speaking, something that, so feeling like, okay, this is something that a human generally, something created, something like a human creation. So, and that is the feeling that he's referring to, probably.
I think that's the feeling of a historical reference to something, having
Exactly.
seen something
Exactly.
being created.
Yeah, I
Now,
mean,
now,
you
for
know,
example, now, for example, if I zoom in on a picture of if I give you a zoomed photograph of a snowflake, and I show it to someone who has never seen what it is, right? Who's not aware. What would be that person's inference? Is that designed by a human or not? I think if someone has never seen it, they would say, okay, this looks like someone actually draw that design, that pattern, right? If they're not aware of what that is. But when you tell them, okay, no, this actually naturally occurs, they'll say, oh, okay, so I thought this was designed by a human. So I think that these are the kind of
I think Madin, there is a
borders.
chance.
Yeah.
Madin, sorry to interrupt you. They'll take that example as in their favor. Basically, oh, you see that snowflake. Somebody's saying that that's being designed, and that's the designer of our universe, basically. Right?
Oh yeah, but that's not what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Because what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, if you show it to someone, they would say, "Oh, so now this was." But what I'm saying is that he would not just think that this is designed. He would think that this is designed by a human. That is
Right.
what he would think,
Right.
but it's
Right.
not.
Right.
This means
It's
his
not.
inference about that is incorrect.
Right. Right. I think what they try to do with this design thing is terrible. Basically, I mean
Yeah,
the analogy they try to put.
yeah, exactly.
Anyway, Madin, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to say, like, if I come and find a sandwich, my instinct is going to be, it must have been created by a person. Yes, like
A
I just
person,
imagine
yeah,
I walk down the street and I just see a sandwich. I'll be like, my instinct says this was a person who created it. It's designed. It didn't just
yeah,
evolve. It didn't just come out of nowhere. It didn't come out ex nihilo, right?
yeah,
Somebody made it. Now, do I have any
exactly.
justification for that? Of course I do,
Yeah,
right? Is Hamza so naive to think that we have no reason to think this? It's just that we have a
yeah,
random intuition. We really don't have justification for the fact that maybe a human made or a designer made a sandwich. We just, despite all of this, despite all of the abundance of historical evidence, we just know instinctually. Really, right? No,
exactly.
it's not. The reason that the reason that you know instinctually is because you know from the historical evidence. Like, duh, right? But here's the thing. Let's say we find out through science that despite any let's say you have a child born in a cabinet, never seen the world before, and he comes out and he looks at a sandwich. He doesn't even know what a sandwich is, and straight away he
Yeah,
knows mom made it, right? Straight away,
yeah,
that still won't be justification that mom made. How does he know that? The fact that he has an instinct doesn't mean it's correct. The way we justify the instinct is through arguments. The mere fact that he thinks that it must be a designer behind it won't be enough, right? That's what we're trying to say here. The fact that I don't merely have an instinct that the sandwich has a sandwich maker. I have justification in the form of arguments, right? If I merely had an instinct, then I can't justify that instinct by simply saying, because I hold an instinct, therefore it's true. Because we have plenty of instincts that are false. We have plenty
that
of
are
millions
false.
of right? But so how do we know this sandwich instinct isn't false either? The way we figure out whether it's true or false is by looking at the evidence. You can justify it by going, is this instinct true that the sandwich is a sandwich maker? And then you come up with the argument. Well, mom makes a sandwich. I've seen a sandwich being made. I've made a sandwich myself. I go to the fridge. There's all of this evidence is circumstantial evidence that even though you've not seen this specific sandwich being made, it's a high probability that it is, right? Unlike a rock. When we look at a rock, we don't go, therefore, even if you had the instinct, therefore, it's the same. Now apply the same to the rock. You see a rock. I have the instinct that's made by a designer, right? But is it justified? We put it through the same arguments. Let's make the arguments now. Right? The arguments are that, yes, we've seen it being made by a person. Is that true? No, it's not. So the argument is false. But have we seen it through being made through morphological processes? Is there scientific theories of geology explaining how rocks form that are better than a man making a rock? Yes, there is. And therefore, there's more justification that the rock wasn't made by a person, rather it's made through geological processes, sedimentation, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I'm not a geologist. Open the geology book, metamorphosis, whatever. I'm just saying words that I don't understand because I don't understand the science. But you know what I mean. There you go. So now we have a justification for it. That's it.
Exactly. I mean, again, whenever you gave a good example about a rock, it's possible that a human just carves out a rock into a shape of another rock, right? But even if it's just like a rock, you would not know. Okay, you would look at it. Okay, this looks like somebody designed it. No, you would not. But if you look at a specific statue, which you would say, no, this looks like a human designed it, not just design. You would say this looks like a human design. So I think, from human design, now they're referring, okay, in general, we can identify design. No, you cannot. You can identify something human-like designed it. Now, I think they also refer to aliens, that maybe if you look at some technology which is alien, we might be able to identify this, that, okay, now this does not look like a human. Now, again, you would say that, okay, this doesn't look like a human design, but this looks like something which has a sort of an intelligence like a human who designed it. But you never say something like that, or you don't infer something like that to a tree. You don't infer that from looking at a tree, looking at a river. You don't say that, because those are the things that that you have observed, or maybe you are aware that these are formed through natural processes. So that's why you don't project design onto such things. So I guess that's the kind of flawed reasoning that they are doing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, let's go.
Let's go.
Move ahead.
Who designed design?
No, there was another one that you said there's the frame of reference, and the other one was perfection.
Yeah.
Well, you can only assess if something is not well designed if you know its purpose.
Yeah.
So are you agreeing that it has a purpose? And that would open another can of worms for them anyway in the first place. So this is a very ridiculous, it's a Christopher Hitchens type of argument. It sounds strong rhetorically, but when you scratch the intellectual surface, it's complete nonsense, right? Because you know its purpose. Like, oh, the human being, we die and we decay. Well, yeah, because that's our purpose. But our purpose is not to live forever. Our purpose is to have the experience the vicissitudes of life, because life, as Allah says in the Quran, that Allah created death and life in order for you to be tested. So these things are tests, and if we react to these life experiences, whether it's our decaying, getting old, the physical problems, and so on and so forth, we react to them in a way that is pleasing to Allah. That's worship, right? And we pass the test, and we are eligible for divine eternal mercy in paradise. So the point is, they have to assume a particular purpose for it, right? And so so those two approaches are.
Can you pause this?
Yeah. Before you talk, no, you don't need to assume a particular purpose. Okay. For the primary reasons I've stated already and you've stated already, it's not really a purpose. You can just take it as a metaphor.
Madan, can I pause you for a second? Is your mic making a little bit of Kelly's mic is making a little bit of humming sound. Kelly, yes, I think yours.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't understand what he means. Like the fact that we die is the purpose. What is he talking about? Purpose? It's not a purpose. It's not really a purpose. Right. It's not really a purpose. If by purpose we mean an intentional, deliberate person intended it to be that way, we don't think it is a purpose. It's just a process. It's a metaphorical, colorful language. We don't need to use. We're not. An atheist is not committed to the word purpose. You want to get rid of purposive language? Fine. It's purposive language is a nice literary tool, literary aid, right? It's just nice. We don't need to use it.
I think it's a tool to demean human beings, basically, and that's a tool to, I think, denigrate people into thinking, no, I should. If atheist says there's no purpose, that somehow makes people think, oh, that's like really lowly position, and no, I shouldn't be in that position, and that's why I should have some purpose to make myself really, in a sense, more important, probably.
Yeah,
and that's why they infuse this kind of wordings in their things, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it just shows then, if that's the case, if it's the case that you don't want to use want to use the word purpose because you want to kind of maintain a sense of purpose, meaning, or whatever. You don't need that.
I mean, even if Madan, if their argument is to be taken, realistically, then what is the purpose in heaven, pretty much, right? Because that's an eternal life. What are you going to achieve there? I don't think so. You're going to achieve anything. You already have it over there. So it's a purposeless life. I think we have done a stream on this, and I don't know if we.
I'm not sure that's what they're doing. How did this word purpose get so involved in here? I can't remember. Why is he using the word purpose? Like, what's the need for it?
Yeah, I see. That's why I think we recognize that they're jumping from one topic to the other, and probably it's a little bit jumpy conversation in a sense, because they have used. And now, where this purpose thing came into being, I'm not quite sure.
I think most people know. Most scientists would say that evolution is just a blind, cold process, right? It doesn't have a purpose. That's like the mainstream view. People like Daniel Dennett, who wants to reclaim the word purpose. Daniel Dennett's had a particular predilection with trying to reclaim things. He's a reclaimer. He wants to, like free will. He wants to reclaim and retain the concept of free will, and say that, look, it's the theistic version of free will is just a folk notion of free will. He's just a reclaimer, right? But Daniel Dennett's version is not necessarily the most popular version of this reclaiming attitude. Is not the most popular thing. Mainstream scientists are perfectly happy to talk about evolution without literally meaning that there is any purpose behind it. There is no purpose behind it. These are just blind processes. And if that hurts your feelings, well, that exposes why theism is so attractive, because it's an emotional argument, right? That doesn't do anything for theism. It shows that atheists can be very, very objective, disinterested, and very, at least good atheists, I would say. They're very objective, very disinterested. They're willing to accept uncomfortable truths, whereas these guys are possibly motivated by wanting to retain comfortable truths, comfortable falsities, right? So, if anything, this kind of sentimental attitude is they're taking they're taking the mask off of what really motivates them. And let's be honest, people like Subboor and Hamza has been on record to say, for example, like Hamza's story to Islam, it was an emotional journey. He felt purposeless. He lacked purpose or meaning or feelings, or he couldn't justify his existence or whatever in a secular humanistic world, and he needed it. He explained it. There was an emotional struggle.
Right. So I think not just his story. Many converts that I have heard stories of, they follow through almost a similar path, pretty much.
Yeah, and that's why, and I'm not inferring anything else, but there's a lot of Muslim converts from prisons. Actually, if you see that this has been mentioned by many Muslims, even that in prison there's a lot of conversion that happens. Am I audible?
This is an inside story, by the way, and you're right, Callie. You brought me to, and maybe I shouldn't say that. So I was talking to a documentary maker at one point, and he had been. Callie, can you mute yourself, because there is a humming sound coming from your side? It's an echo. So I was talking to a documentary maker, basically, and he was making a documentary on one of the what do you call, the most central jails of the United States. And he had told me that majority of the gang leaders within these prison cells or prison systems were Muslims, basically. Why? Because they were mostly converts and they were converting over there for some reason. And they were getting a lot more followers in
Mhm.
terms of being reversed, basically, because they were being more influential. So this is a true story, basically, what you were saying, as it's being the religion being able to influence these guys or and give them some kind of purpose, basically, for what they have done. There is a repentance for them. This gives them the repentance that they need,
Yeah, it
basically.
gives them a second chance, actually. I guess
Exactly.
it gives
Exactly.
them a second chance in life. And I guess that's what helps them. That's what actually motivates them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think,
All right.
yeah, what I was talking about is, so that is one bit. And another point that another mistake that Hamza is making is this. Uh, the flaws that are being pointed out, or the imperfection in design that are being pointed out by non-believers. And because Hamza was saying that if you're saying that these are imperfection, that you are inferring design and purpose already. Well, actually, I think then when a non-believer actually points out these imperfections, what he's actually doing is he's responding to a theist's argument from design or perfection. So what he's saying is that from your worldview, from a theistic worldview, if you're claiming that there is perfection, then actually it's not. When we look at things, then it doesn't seem perfect. So if it was designed, then this is not a perfect design. So there is it's a sort of a counter. It's a response to the argument from a theist who's claiming that there's perfection in creation. It's not that he's claiming on its own that, oh, you see, see these imperfections. What he's saying is that we see these imperfections. He expects a non-believer would, or a non-theist would expect these imperfections, because he would say, okay, these are understandable, because these were not designed. But he's just using the word imperfection in a very colloquial way, as Ahmed pointed out. But
Yeah.
if he's saying that to a theist, then he's actually responding to his argument that you are claiming, to his claim, basically, to theistic claim about perfection in the creation, which he's saying that it doesn't seem to be the case. So I think that's one mistake that Hamza is making. He thinks that he's made some sort of a point. Well, no, you have not. Okay, so yeah, so
Yeah.
that's one mistake.
This is
Yeah,
very, this is,
Ahmed.
yeah, yeah. You could just say it's like an internal inconsistency, right? If
Exactly,
we
exactly.
You
internal
you
inconsistency.
know you know, Kelly, what could their response be? See, just you're
Yeah.
taking this verse and taking it, generalizing it. This verse is only talking about the heavens, right? And then, I mean, your objection to that would be, but they have never seen
I've
any
not yet pointed.
imperfection.
I've not yet. I'm not sure what you have understood. Why I mentioned this verse, because I was going to discuss this verse. What do you think? Why I mentioned this verse?
I thought you were talking about the imperfection thing,
No,
right?
no, no. I've
Okay.
not. I've not actually brought this verse yet. So what I
Okay.
wanted,
Okay.
and it's
Okay.
good that you
Go
brought
on
this
then.
up.
Go
Yeah.
on.
So let me. Yeah. Why I brought this verse is this. So Hamza also pointed out that in order to declare something as imperfect. So that was the second point. First point was that you were actually Hamza's first point was that if you're saying something as imperfect, declaring something as imperfect design, then you're already inferring that there is a purpose. So we have already refuted that. Now the second point he mentioned was, if you're declaring something as imperfect, then you can only do that if you know the purpose for that thing, and only when you'll compare it to that purpose, then only you can declare something is imperfect or not, right? Now the thing is, what that means is, we cannot declare anything as perfect or imperfect, right? Because we can never know the true purpose behind anything. If it was, let's say, if everything was created by God, then he didn't tell us the purpose of each and everything. He didn't, right? So if he didn't, and if he, even if he did, we cannot just trust him, right? If you look at this verse. So if, let's say, God says in this verse that he is the one who creates the seven heavens and one above the other, you will never see any imperfection in the creation of the most compassionate. So what he's declaring, what God is declaring is this, You will never see any imperfection in this creation. So look again, do you see any flaw? Now, what God is inviting us to do is to look in the creation, and he's declaring that you will find only perfection and you will not be able to find any flaws. Now, if we accept Hamza's point, and which I do agree with, philosophically speaking, that on its own, if I declare something as perfect or imperfect, then I need to know the purpose of that thing, right? So if I know the purpose, only then can I declare something whether it's perfect or not. Now, but the thing is, we don't know the purpose of everything in this universe. So if we don't know the purpose of everything in this universe, and this cannot even be claimed by a Muslim, or because they don't know the purpose of each and everything. Now, God, in that case, this claim is now unfalsifiable. Whether something is perfect or imperfect, you can never declare anything as perfect or imperfect, which means that this verse is now meaningless, because God is asking us to look and look into flaws and identify any flaws, but that is impossible. We can never declare something as perfect or imperfect given this logical limitation that we have, that we
Exactly.
don't know the purpose behind we can never truly know the purpose behind it. So then this verse is inviting us to do is actually impractical and impossible. So I guess then if Hamza is correct, which I think he is, then this verse is meaningless.
Yeah, that's correct. I was thinking exactly in the similar sort of lines, because if we go by what Subboor and Hamza is saying, then there's no such thing as imperfection, because
Exactly.
anything that you show could be perfect because it was the purpose of the creator or something. That's what we're trying to say. So if human beings just walked around and just started exploding, maybe that's just the purpose. Human beings
Yeah,
have a defect of the eye. That's the purpose of the eye, to have a defect,
exactly.
right? It's like it's as you said, unfalsifiable, because there's what would be an imperfection then? Nothing, right? Nothing is an imperfection, because everything is just it can be a perfection. But that's not what we mean
Yeah,
by perfection, right? It's relative to something, and you can, for example, have this kind of concept, and it can be falsifiable, and because you don't need to and you don't need purposive language. All you just need to, in terms of imperfection is just not related to purpose. Imperfection can be related to just function, right? Like you can say, for example, this eye gradually evolved in order to get more precise and more accurate in order to kind of navigate itself. But every now and then you will have cataract or something like that, or because of the blood vessels and the arteries and the veins behind the eye and the optic nerve, there's a blind spot, right? So there is a direction in which the eye was evolving, right? And to fit a particular sort of demand in the environment, right? So that it can increase the prospect of survival, right? And by imperfection, we just mean that it didn't do it without flaws, right? For example, if simply the blood vessels, optic nerve thing wasn't a problem, then the eye wouldn't have the blind spot, and that would have increased its survival, increased the prospects of survival, because you wouldn't have blind spots. Similarly, if the optic nerve was sharper, we could see further, or something like that, in terms of processes, right? Obviously, that now when you've defined it accurately, now we do have a falsifiable standard of imperfection versus perfection. We can think of different ways in which the eye could be better fit for an environment that increases the prospect of survival without it even using any purposive language. But if by purpose we mean an intentional creator, in this sense, by using the word function, all we mean is a blind kind of a set of processes and a demand in the environment, and a quote unquote, and I'm using the quote unquote to say, when I say goal, I don't mean a real goal set by a person, but a goal by the demand of the environment. So goal here is not meaning goal set by God, goal set by Jesus, but it's like a goal in some sense. It's kind of metaphorical, partially metaphorical, set by the environmental demands, right? Because there was a pressure in the environment, so the eye was somewhat disadvantageous genes that coded for the eye of a particular standard were being made redundant through death, right? And in that sense, we can see an attitude, a kind of a goal-directed nature of evolution. Some people disagree that it really is goal-directed, but you can see a sort of goal-directed, and you can see that we can theorize that had it been not for the limitations of evolution, the eye could have been sharper, the eye could have been better, had more focus, the eye could have not had developed a cataract at this age, etc. And it would have been better for that goal. So there you go. Now we can identify imperfections. It's falsifiable because we're not just using the word imperfection, but it's directed towards a particular goal, and we don't have to use any language that assumes a purpose of the sentient sense. That's it.
Yeah, I think their only objection to that would be, and I think you're making a slightly different point, but I think if some atheist would listen to your point, they would say that, but how do you know that is the function? That is the exact function that God created this for. So you cannot just still cannot find any flaw, because because they by definition now are claiming that any design that God created, actually that was the intended design and that was the intended purpose, whatever purpose he's actually able to serve. So
Yeah,
even if a person goes blind, even if a person is born blind, then you would say, well, in that case, it was not the purpose. It was the exact purpose that his body had to serve. His body was a test.
This goes back to something very similar to the objection to the problem of evil, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if you can't make any predictions about God, then you're stuck with kind of skeptical theism or something, and that kind of is a defeater in itself. So if you want to make the God completely unfalsifiable, then it's a redundant theory, right? And so you should not be able to make any inferences of design. How do you know God would design stuff? Why should you assume God designed things? So if you go down this road, then I will demand the theist to be consistent, because if you think, maybe this was purposely designed to be this way. Any defect in the human biology, it was just purposely designed to be in this particular way, right? The person with the disabilities, it was designed to be this particular way, right? But then you're making it so falsifiable. Then why? Then it does open the doors to a Pandora's box sort of situation, right? Where not Pandora's box. It leads to the point where you do end up making almost theism, all of it, unfalsifiable. Because why should we assume God's purposes, right? But if we can't assume God's purposes, which is what the theist is saying, then we can't assume God has a purpose. God would design anything. So then you've made the design hypothesis unfalsifiable, because when you say God designed the universe, you're saying that it's more likely that God would design, that this is better evidence on the hypothesis that God exists or something like that. But you can't make any predictions anymore because it's unfalsifiable, because you're assuming God's purpose. If you assume God's purpose was to design a universe, you're committing the same crime as assuming God's purpose would be to not design dysfunctional organisms, right? I would submit that it leads to that. And then I would also say that that's a bad way of thinking about the theory, because in the same way we do have certain expectations with the problem of evil, we do have certain expectations for an omnipotent, omniscient, benevolent designer. And we would say, for example, an omniscient, omnipotent, benevolent designer, it's highly unlikely, given that he has a multiplicity of different ways of creating the same thing, that he would create it through this step-by-step, gradual, billion-year process that is death-ridden, torture-ridden process of evolution, and then create all these kind of forms, etc., in order to have these sort of functions. You have to have some assumptions. You have to have some understanding of that omniscient, benevolent creator won't create eyes that can just, or let me put it in a different context. It won't just create appendix that can kill somebody, right? You have to, because That is not what a merciful, compassionate deity would do. When you put those ingredients in, you can. Otherwise, then we can't even have that. We can't even make the claim that the presence of evil, the presence of crime, or the presence of suffering, I should say, it contradicts or decreases the probability of an omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent creator, because maybe that was his purpose. But I would say that suffering definitely lowers the likelihood of a merciful, compassionate, omnipowerful deity, right? And in the same sense, I would say genetic deformities or blind spots in the eye or appendixes exploding or the horses what's it called, the giraffe's vein, nerve, the laryngeal nerve, is not fit for an omniscient, omnipotent deity. And if they want to claim that you can't know, it's just unfalsifiable, then you have to get rid of all sorts of theistic inferences, because in each one of them, they assume there is a motive behind a god to fine tune, to design, to create, etc.
Absolutely, and that's actually the same point as I was mentioning, and it goes back to the verse that I was mentioning too. It's not just that we cannot infer it; it would also be against the very thing that your Quran is inviting us to do. It is inviting us to look into the universe and see if we can identify any flaws. If it is logically impossible to find any flaws, then why is Quran asking us to do that?
Right. Okay, guys, what do you guys think? Shall we stop for tonight, or shall we invite the callers, or further in the review? What do you guys think?
What do you think, Madin?
It's up to you guys. I don't mind. Does he make any more significant point? Or
No, I think they go on up until the end. I think they have different arguments and different flaws in their arguments, but I think it's going to be too lengthy. Right now, how much we have covered as of now. I think we have only covered up until up to 10 minutes roughly.
Kylie, your mic. Kylie, your mic.
Yeah. Surprising, man. Madin, you have given your bug to Kali now.
Actually, yeah, I have actually logged in from my mobile today. That's the reason.
Okay. Yeah, it's been choppy, it's been echoey, and yeah. So okay, tell me, guys.
Let's just say one more thing. These guys don't understand that if you make, like I said, if you make the concept of a god unfalsifiable, then it's just not a good explanation in the first place. It is compatible with every prediction. You're just changing the game, right? And therefore, it's not a good theory. Simple as that. You can't just render it unfalsifiable and think it's a good thing, right? It's not a good thing.
Madin, you're saying that, but they already adhere to it already, because anything you bring from their inconsistencies in the Quran, no, we don't understand. Probably there is a different meaning to these certain words, or maybe there is a context to it that we don't understand. Or if you point out at different, hadiths clashing with certain things, so they are already doing it basically, right? They're not to the extent that you are saying, probably, but to a very far extent, probably already they're doing the same.
Yeah. And I just want to reassert something that when you have two theories or more theories, more than two theories, if a theory, if there is more than one way on one theory of creating or producing the result, and there's another theory where there's fewer ways of producing that result, right? The one with the fewer is more likely. This is basic kind of abductive or Bayesian reasoning, right? And these people may not realize that. I've always used it in a context of, I've illustrated this example through the context of, let's say, a homeless man robbing a house versus, let's say, Bill Gates robbing a house. let's say Bill Gates have a multiplicity of different ways to rob a house, and he robs the house in the exact same way that a homeless man would rob a house. Let's say Bill Gates has access to CIA agents, he has access to a multiplicity of different technologies, he has access to helicopters, and etc., etc. He has millions of ways of how he can break into a house, and so on. And then you have the homeless man has much less ways of breaking in the house. And by the way, we use this sort of thinking in criminal cases as well, right? If somebody came in, like say you go to a house and you see everything kind of like the front door broken in a more shoddy way possible, right? And then you compare it to the Bill Gates theory, where he could have used, more experts to, like, let's say unhinge the door without breaking it, or go through the glass, open the glass up using technology, without leaving damage like that, right? If there was those two theories in court, the police, the prosecution would be, thinking, well, it's unlikely that a sophisticated criminal broke in this way with all these means. Given the damage, given the broken pieces of the house, this is more fit for a low-key, small-scale criminal, maybe a homeless man who was just high on drugs. He broke through the door in this kind of incompetent way, right? It fits that better. Now the thing is it logically compatible with Bill Gates using any means possible to get through? And of course it is. Bill Gates could have just chosen to break into the house in the least competent way possible. That's one logical possibility. But it's highly unlikely, given what we know about Bill Gates and his power, to do it that way, right? It's highly unlikely for a sophisticated career criminal to break into the house that way. It's more likely, so we're talking about likelihoods, it's more likely for a incompetent, lowly criminal or a homeless man with no competence to break in the house that way, right? And this kind of example gets argued in criminal cases every day, right? To distinguish between two or more theories, right? And say it's more probable that this is not the work of a career criminal, it's the work of an incompetent, in order to increase the probability. And we think, therefore, beyond reasonable doubt, that the incompetent criminal did it, the homeless man did it, not Bill Gates. This is the exact same thing that we should use when it comes to God. A infinitely powerful God, can he create human beings through the evolutionary processes, leaving these kind of course he can, through gradual mutations and so on. Of course he can. It's logically possible. That's one option, but he has a million other ways of doing it. But he chooses to do it in the exact way where, on the naturalistic hypothesis, that we would expect through gradual mutation, gradual evolution, in which there's fewer such options. God has an array of ways of creating the same thing, the end result, but he chooses the one way to do it to make it look like it's just through blind processes. Whereas on the blind process theory, that is pretty much the only way to do it, right? So which one is better fit? Just like the example between the career criminal or Bill Gates versus the homeless man or the incompetent criminal, although it's logically possible that Bill Gates could have done it that way, it's more likely that the homeless man did it. And similarly, although it's logically possible, it's an option to God to use theistic evolution to do it that way. It's highly unlikely that a merciful, compassionate, powerful God would just do it in this kind of weird way when he has multiplicity of different options. Whenever a theory has more than one option, right? Whenever a theory has more than one prediction, therefore, because one prediction of God, of a merciful, omnipotent God, is that he doesn't have to do it that way. Another prediction is that if he chose, he could have done it that way, right? On evolution, though, that is the only, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get instantaneous creation. On evolution, though, it's highly unlikely you're going to get lack of pseudogenes. Highly unlikely that you won't leave morphological traits. It's highly unlikely, right? Whereas on God, because he has more than one option, right? It's actually quite, it's because of the number of options, you would think that God could have done it in all these other different ways. Therefore, it lowers the probability for a God theory to work, right? And so between the two, you would go, it's more likely that this happened through a blind process, blind evolution, without theism. Can you see that?
Right, right. True that. True. Agree to that point. Madan and Kali, what do you guys think? Shall we close the stream? Shall we continue with the review, or shall we take open the stream, and maybe if there are a caller or two, maybe get them in for 5 minutes or something like that, or even take the questions from the live chat. I think there was one question for on in the live chat, which I remember. Think. What do you guys think?
I won't be staying for too long, so it's up to you guys.
We can always close the stream. Then what do you think? I think we can close the stream. Short and sweet stream, probably.
Yeah. Do you wanna engage with the audience a little bit then? I think Mulhid al-Islam is he's obviously trolling theists, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he's being serious, so we can tell by the language. I just know that through instinct, right? We don't need
No,
any argument.
he has been to our live stream once, and he used certain things. He didn't probably blaspheme, but he did say a few things which both Callie and I didn't agree with, right? So I kicked him out, by the way. So he's still in the chat, but and I'm willing to take him on the stream next time. Right now we're not opening the stream, by the way, but just for him to know that I think we're not one of those channels who's gonna tolerate that kind of a behavior. Just being very blunt about it.
Yeah. So like it says, wrong example. Bill Gates breaks into. I mean, that's just a funny comment. I don't take that serious. I just assume that's based on the Bill Gates conspiracies, right? That he's wants to
Yeah,
monitor
yeah.
everything. And here's another one. We appreciate your jokes, I suppose. I mean, I don't know what you're. Are you an atheist? Are you a theist? What are you? I'm interested.
I think he's an atheist, or rather, he's in our camp, you could say. But he's I think yeah.
Okay.
He can say.
Right. Do
Yeah,
you want
he's.
to? I think Bilal said this. Do you want to deal with this because that's the only other substantive question I think in the comments.
Yeah, I think this is the question I remember, right? Yeah, Bilal's question. Yeah.
We'll deal with this and then we'll go. What do you think?
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so what do you guys think about the evolutionary arguments against naturalism? I think that's what it's called. It says that if we evolve, then our senses, what we think is true, is not reliable. Right. So that's Alvin Plantinga argument, the evolutionary argument against naturalism. Right. And I'll say that I'll say we've discussed this before on another stream that we discussed, Subboor in. I think Subboor makes this argument a lot, so that's why it's probably raised, because Subboor is a very, very big front runner of this argument. And what I would say is that the Plantinga's argument within the philosophical within the philosophical academic circles has been significantly debunked. There's plenty of things wrong with it. Evolutionary biologists, cognitive scientists as well, they've commented seriously on it, on the sense that Plantinga assumes every possible. He thinks that the probability of ourselves having truth-detecting senses is either extremely low or inscrutable, meaning that we can't have any probability behind it, right? So either extremely low or inscrutable. And if that's the case, that it debunks naturalism simply because if our senses are not correct, then we don't know truth. If not, we don't know. We can't true beliefs. If we can't true beliefs, then we can't know that naturalism is true. And if we can't know naturalism is true, or we can't know anything is true, then it debunks everything, right? Meaning that it's self-defeating. Therefore, if you're a naturalist who doesn't believe there is a God guiding the process, but you believe in the blind process of evolution guiding the process, given that it's highly unlikely or that you will have accurate senses, you're going to have to think that either it's we don't have accurate senses, or we can't really know whether we have accurate senses, and this would debunk naturalism, because you need to have accurate senses to say naturalism is true. You have to have accurate senses to know atheism is true. You have to have accurate senses to know Kylie exists, but we can't know any of those things. So we just defeat our entire epistemology. We just nuclear bombed everything, and we're just walking around with, we're just walking contradictions. That is the devastation, apparently, Plantinga wants to say. And the only way to rescue this is to believe in God, who would guide the process. I think that is kind of the gist of the argument. And what I would say is that most people think that, most philosophers think that the idea that it's highly improbable to have accurate senses, etc., and so on, is not really the case, because we have lots of evidence of the fact that there is guidedness in evolution, in the sense that things do get gradually sharper. Let's say that one argument is things do get gradually sharper. For example, the eyesight gets gradually more sharper. Our hands became more fit for picking up certain things. But there is a direction, but maybe that's like a weaker argument. The main thing he tries to say is, Plantinga tries to say, is by the concept of epiphenomenalism, right? If I can pronounce it properly, which is that there is no connection between our minds and truth. So it could very well be that everything that we're projecting right now is just like there is no connection between our conscious experience and evolution. Let me just kind of finesse that before we debunk it. What Plantinga trying to say is that, for example, it could very well be that there is water like 10 yards away from us. And so evolution may create, let's say, an adaptation to make us more conducive to go towards that water. But it's not absolutely necessary that the mental belief that we form that there is water up north to be connected to that adaptation. It could very well be that we hallucinate. It could very well be that we hallucinate something entirely different, right? Reality is, when we're going towards the water, it's not even water at all. It's something else. We're not even going towards, the north. Not going towards north. We're going south. But our minds kind of just have this kind of belief that we're going in that direction, right? So the point is that we could have evolved to have completely false beliefs, right? And we could still have survived, right? So some evolutionist says that no, there's a connection between truth and survival. That we need, evolution will obviously select for brains that are accurate to discover true beliefs, because without true beliefs, we won't survive. We need to know that the water is down there in that direction. We need to climb that mountain, or go towards north so we can go find it. Because if we went south, we won't find it and we will die. Well, Plantinga says no, right? It could very well be that the evolution selected for our behavior to go towards any direction. To go towards a direction, the right direction, of course, so that we can survive. But our mental, the conscious experience doesn't have to connect with that. We could hallucinate something entirely different from what's actually happening out there, right? Because there's a million brains, a million different types of, or a gazillion or an infinite different types of conscious experiences that is compatible with going towards what we think is water, right? And henceforth, that is just, there's no connection between our mental faculties, our conscious experience, and the truth about the world. And therefore, it's entirely possible for us to survive while we don't have true beliefs. Have I articulated that properly? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? I mean, obviously the audience can't answer, but I'm just assuming Philo, and I've talked about it before, Philo and Guiley. Unless you're
I think that's a fair representation. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, so there's no connection between our. It could be just an illusion. So we could be just hallucinating or having a false belief about the world, because evolution is not. There's no real reason why evolution has to accurately make sure that our conscious beliefs align with the reality. Just like a frog. Let's say a frog's perception of the fly might be entirely different. We see it as a fly, but the frog might see it as a dot. Frog has no understanding it's a fly. All the frog needs to do to survive is to eat the fly, what we see as the fly. But to the frog's conscious experience, he doesn't see it as a fly. He doesn't know it's a fly. It's a false. So he will have this kind of false belief, right? Maybe he sees it as colors. Maybe he sees it as some sensations. Maybe he doesn't see any sensations at all. and henceforth there is no connection between the real reality and our conscious experiences. We could just have any he tries to say that we're more likely to have these illusions because whilst there's one logically possible conscious experience which is fact-driven, it's accurate, right? There's one logical, but there's a infinite number of other logical possible of fictions that our brain evolution could have selected that is entirely compatible with survival, and we could still survive, and yet these fictions would have been the case, and therefore it's highly unlikely that that one logical possibility is the case, has been selected for it by evolution, right? And that's what he wants to say. But what I would say to that is that, one, we don't know the actual probability distribution of all those things. So let's say we have an infinite number of all these illusory conscious states, none of the false conscious states, and only one of them is true. Why should we assume that out of those infinite, each one has equal probability? That's one problem. Yeah. So because we don't assume that is, each one is of equal probability, we can't really say that it's highly unlikely. It could very well be that evolution did select for truth-forming beliefs, right? Another objection would be that it would be highly, like certain cognitive scientists have said, and evolutionary biologists have said, who work in this kind of area with the evolution of the brain and soul, it'll be highly unlikely to have step-by-step evolution where you have one step, one situation where we're being directed to go towards a source for our survival, and for some reason our brain just hallucinates another reality. That would be a weird way of going about things. In fact, that's highly complex. It's easier for evolution just to have sensations that accurately map towards the reality. That our brains will evolve towards having more and more accurate sensations that genuinely says that the water is in that direction rather than in another direction. There's no reason to have false beliefs, right? And also have survival when evolution could just do. Evolution could just kill two birds with one stone, right? So that's like another argument that evolution scientists say, etc. But I like the first one, which is to say that because it's very similar to any other evolutionary argument debunking the improbability of something. So for example, it used to be the case that people used to say it's highly unlikely that I can form, because it's highly unlikely that evolution would go from this step to that step. But reality is that we don't know the number of mutations that are the evolutionary pressures that would direct it. We don't know it, right? We don't know the evolutionary pressures. We don't know the probability distribution. So I like the first argument, which says that we don't really know the probability distribution as to why we should think it's unlikely that truth-forming beliefs should form. Right? We don't know the probability distribution, and then at that point, we can't say that it's unlikely that we would form truth-forming beliefs. At best we have agnosticism, right? We only have agnosticism, and Plantinga may say that if you're agnostic about it, then you still don't know whether you have truth-forming beliefs, etc. But I would say that is that if we should have this, in philosophy we call it phenomenal conservatism. Until and unless we have a defeater, right, there's no reason to think that it is false, right? There's no reason for us to think that it's false that we have truth-forming beliefs. It could be the case that evolution has given us false beliefs. It could be the case that evolution has given us truth beliefs. We don't really know. We can't distinguish between the two. At this moment, we don't. But phenomenal conservatism is a form of pragmatism. For pragmatic reasons, we have all the good reasons to think and act and operate as though it is true, right? That's another sort of objection. There's another final thing that I would say is that Plantinga's argument is self-defeating in and of itself. He wants to offer to the atheist The idea that if you think evolution is true, then it's highly unlikely that you'll have truth-forming beliefs. And if it's highly unlikely that you have truth-forming beliefs, it's highly unlikely that naturalism is true. If it's highly unlikely naturalism is true, then it's highly unlikely that evolution is true as well. It's self-defeating. But that, by that same token, Plantinga's argument will be also self-defeating to the naturalist, right? Because you need to have truth-forming beliefs to believe in Plantinga's argument. You need to think Plantinga's argument is true rather than false, right? To think that Plantinga's argument gets off the ground. But if Plantinga's argument doesn't get off the ground because you can't form truth belief,
then how can you trust in his argument? Basically,
yes, exactly. So it's a defeater of his own argument.
His own
right?
argument, right.
And so we have no good reason to believe in Plantinga. We don't have.
If naturalism is true, is true, you can't trust Plantinga's argument.
Yeah, which means that it's a paradox. It's almost like a paradox. Right. And guess these paradoxes appeared in philosophy historically many times, right? You can't prove your senses with your senses, but if you thought your senses were flawed, then you can't say that everything is flawed because your senses are flawed or something like that. It's just a paradox. It's like you're stuck in this kind of. There's another. Sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. There's another example of this. It's like the Pharaohism or something. I think it's called Pharaohism, or Aristotle's argument that we can't have any form of knowledge, right, or something like that. If you can't have any form of knowledge, then you can't have any true beliefs, including the statement that you can't have any true, you can't have a knowledge or something like that. It's self-defeating in some sense, right? Some people may want to say that the only argument that is sound is the proposition that you can't have any true beliefs. You can't have any knowledge, right? Some people may want to say that, but there's no reason for us to go to that. It genuinely is a philosophical mystery in the sense that
I think I talked about this with Kelly in our Hindi podcast, Hindi stream. Kelly, if you remember that. Anyway, move on. Kelly, Madhu, sorry.
Yeah, I would say that any sort of self-defeating arguments that defeats the basis of the argument right at the beginning loses thrust straight away. So the naturalist then will be left with nothing. He will just go, all right, I can't have any true beliefs, but I can't analyze arguments. Then I can't analyze any arguments. In fact, in order to know that evolution is unlikely to produce true beliefs and more likely to produce false beliefs, I need to think evolution is true, but I can't even accept evolution is true anymore. I can't do any probability calculations. I don't know anything about natural selections anymore because natural selection is false. So I'm just left with nothing in the end. Right? So it just defeats Plantinga's argument. And in those situations, I would just, what would I say? I would just say then, therefore, we don't have good reason to think Plantinga's argument is right. So it goes back to phenomenal conservatism. At best, what we'd say is that it's an interesting philosophical idea, but we have phenomenal conservatism. That is, we should it's a form of pragmatism. We've got pragmatic reasons, even though we can't be ironclad sure that it is true. Pragmatic reasons that it's a reasonable way to go about things, to look at the world as it is, until we have a strong defeater. Plantinga tried to provide a defeater, but his defeater has a defeater because it's self-contradictory, right? And therefore, it's not really a defeater anymore. So we're back with phenomenal conservatism. Yes, it's true that there's some issues with evolution. It could very well be the case that evolution might not give us true beliefs. But how inaccurate are those beliefs? Is it inaccurate by 90%? Is it inaccurate by 20%? We can't tell because we don't really know the probability distribution, because we don't really know the exact evolutionary pressures that our brains were subjected to over 4 billion, sorry, not 4 billion, but 2 billion years or whatever it was, right? It could very well be there were certain evolutionary pressures that made sure that we get more and more accurate beliefs. Yeah. And therefore we can't rule it out. Simple as that, right? And since we can't rule it out, we should have some sort of agnosticism towards it. But but also we should also rely upon phenomenal conservatism to think, we have pragmatic reasons to think that the reality is the way it is. We don't really have to be ironclad sure that evolution is perfectly made sure reality is true. It's just that when I see a tree and it's 10 yards away, there is a tree that is 10 yards away, right? Until I have a defeater to think, really a strong defeater, to think that is highly likely to be false, I've got no good reason to think that it is. That's it.
All right, Madan. Here's a question: if evolution cannot produce truth-forming beliefs, all right, and does that mean that theism follows?
No, exactly. Yeah, no, it doesn't. So
Right. So
continuous.
I mean, we're missing. I think it's he's in his argument. I think Bantinga is mistaking with only two options, probably. If not naturalism, then theism, probably.
Just let me
Right.
just say
So
that
this is probably a
this argument in and of itself isn't trying to prove theism, right? So Plantinga
yeah.
tries
So
to.
I mean, yeah. I mean, but he's using it for his case, basically, right? That, and I do agree to your point. Basically, he's saying that naturalism cannot be true because of this reason and whatever,
Yeah,
right?
that's all he's.
But his ultimate aim is to,
Yeah, he's just trying to say that materialists or naturalists can't have a
truth-forming
epistemology.
beliefs, basically.
Yeah, a reliable epistemology because it's self-defeating. Simple as that.
Right.
Later, or he has different arguments to substantiate, belief towards God, which he thinks, for example, is likely to produce truth-forming beliefs. And he makes these. He doesn't do it through form of exact, like a cosmological argument or a fine-tuning argument. I'm not sure what his views are on that. I don't think he considers those to be strong arguments. His main argument is the argument from properly basic beliefs, right? He thinks that you don't need an argument at all for God. He thinks, for example, just like any form of other kind of axiom that we accept, like sense data, there are certain unjustified axioms that we just accept. Like and he gives examples like the fact that the past didn't come. The past didn't come into existence 2 seconds ago. That there is a past. We can't substantiate that. The problem of other minds, we can't substantiate that other people have other minds. Induction, for example, we can't substantiate induction. Sense data, we can't substantiate sense data. That that our minds are accurately mapping with the reality, right? That the tree really exists out there. We don't know these things. We just accept these things as properly basic beliefs. It's a very similar argument to what Daniel Hakiki argued. And then he adds to all those properly basic beliefs another properly basic belief, which is theism, right? And he says theism is also similarly like an axiom. You don't need justification for it. And how he explains how theism should be also an axiom is he says that there's actually no criteria for what is an axiom and not. That's what he says. Since there's no criteria for what is an axiom, we, given that lots of human beings believe in theism, and even if they can't provide evidence for theism, just like we can't provide evidence for induction, just like we can't provide evidence for other minds, just like we can't provide evidence for the past, right? We don't need to provide evidence for belief in theism. It's just another axiom, a properly basic belief, because there's no criteria for it. That's his argument. That's his major argument. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's all right. I hope Bilal, that was a thorough answer to. I think Martin, we discussed this argument long way back in one of our conversations, probably, right? Probably in 2016 or something like that, I think. But yeah. Anyways, I think Bilal got the answer that he was looking for. I'll just take up one more comment here. I think Mulad Al-Islam writes, I'm in your camp. I'm just being totally funny. Life's too short for being too much serious. Thank you again. I didn't mean any harm, basically, he says. And so what my point here is, I think it's perfectly fine to be funny and all those things. But if you cross a line and start doing blasphemy, which our channel strictly prohibits, and which you probably, I don't know if you did it or not, then yeah, I mean, if you say something that probably is not in line with what we think should be done on this channel, then we'll have to take some actions. But perfectly fine, we'll forgive you for this anyways.
Yeah, because he has
So
already apologized. So yeah, I mean, we
yeah,
don't need
so we'll
to
forgive you for that. Yeah.
remind him any further. But yes, yeah, that's the policy. So
Yeah.
and we expect I'm quite sure that he'll follow that policy going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just also add, lingering from the Plantinga topic, theists have a very similar epistemological issue under theism as well, right? So just like Plantinga raises evolution, and if evolution is true, you're highly unlikely to have true beliefs, you're more likely to have false beliefs. If that's the case, then you can't have any true beliefs, including the idea of atheism is true or naturalism is true. And if you can't know that, then it just defeats everything, right? Then it leads to global skepticism. Global skepticism means that you're skeptical about everything. That is, you can't have any true beliefs, etc., including the belief that you should have a global skepticism, perhaps. It leads to these kind of self-defeating issues. This global skepticism that you can reach as an endpoint can be reached also from theism. Like atheists have, as Plantinga raises, the somewhat issue of the evolutionary arguments against naturalism, given that we have evolution. Theists have the same problem because given that they have skeptical theism, right? Given that they have a infinitely powerful God that might deceive them, right? They themselves acknowledge this possibility, right? So just like they kind of say, if evolution is true, it's highly unlikely that it will create true beliefs versus false beliefs. It's more likely there'll be false beliefs. And you can say the same thing from the perspective, or very similar thing from the perspective of theism. If theism is true, we can't know what an infinitely powerful mind would do, right? Sorry, if theism plus skeptical theism is true. If skeptical theism is true, for example, God may have mysterious reasons, as the skeptical theist accepts. And guess what? Skeptical theism is accepted by people like Hamza. Skeptical theism is accepted by people like Subboor. Almost all theists. Whenever you talk to them about the problem of evil, at some point they would launch skeptical theism. So if evolution is such a problem for naturalists, skeptical theism is a very big problem for theists. And under skeptical theism, you can't know, for example, whether or not God has a mysterious reason or not for deceiving you. There's an infinite number of ways God can create our brains or the reality in a way that is actually not true in order to deceive us for maybe like a morally good end, right? Like
Totally.
Yeah, there's an infinite number of ways. So there's no reason, or even on theism, to think that, for example, our senses are accurately reflecting things. God could have just created these things for us for our test, or whatever. Yeah, just like somebody would say that that child that is dying, we may not be able to see all the reasons that God has in his mind because of skeptical theism. There might be a mysterious reason that only God knows. If you accept that and bite that bullet, that is an issue, because it does lead to global skepticism, because God could have created the Quran, he created revelation to deceive you, when in reality none of these things are the case. He might have a deceptive purpose for misleading you by creating illusions, optical illusions, whatever, and reality might not be the way it is. And this can lead to also global skepticism, just like I raised about Plantinga's argument, because even the fact of, therefore, God deceiving you might not be true, right? So both have this problem if you go down that route. This is why I don't go down the route of global skepticism. You don't have to show that theists are encumbered with global skepticism, etc., etc. But if they want to go down that route, they have that issue as well. Even with local skepticism, right? Which is that. So what I mean by global skepticism is that every belief is unlikely to be true, including the belief that every belief is unlikely to be true, which leads to complete mind-numbing paradoxes, right? Complete mind-numbing paradoxes. But you don't have to hold the if you don't hold the view of global skepticism, you can still think of local skepticism, right? Which is that you may know the truth of, for example, God, God sent this message or God exists from certain arguments, but then as soon as you invoke something like skeptical theism, you might think that we can, although we can substantiate or think that there is a God, we can't know if he has a mysterious reason. We can't rule out the possibility that there is a mysterious reason that he has that led to him deceiving us. This avoids global skepticism, but it leads to local skepticism, which is still a big, massive issue for theists.
True that. True. All right, Kelly, do you want to add anything to it? I think, yeah.
No, nothing from
Go
my
ahead.
side.
Yeah. I think, Madan, shall we then close the stream? I think it was a good stream, and I hope that people, the audience, enjoy it and are already enjoying it, because I see there's a decent number of audience. Before shutting down the stream, though, I would like to request all our audience to like, subscribe, and share our streams. They're going under the radar as of now, basically, and for some reason we are not getting the views that we should probably. Maybe there is a reason that we don't do it as frequently or regularly, or I don't know. We need to find a solution, but one way that you all can help us is by sharing as much as possible, liking and commenting under the streams as much as possible, raising questions, maybe asking questions. I think comments under the streams help a lot in being noticed by the YouTube. So do all that, and as well as if you can, and if you want to, and if you like our channel, our content, then do think of supporting us whichever way you can. I think, as you can see in the banner bar, you can donate to us on Patreon, as well as on Buy Me a Coffee, or there are other means through YouTube if you want to do that. But other than that, I think it was a wonderful stream. We still have a bunch of stuff left from that review, the video clip that we were reviewing, and we might take that up in our next English stream. Kelly, Madan, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for joining. All right, bye for now.
All right.